Minister, pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, the subject matter that we are studying today is the supplementary estimates. Vote 1B, 10B under the Department of Environment, and vote 1B under Parks Canada Agency. Before we begin, I'd like to advise members that Mr. Hallman has a problem with both his ears, and he can lip read, so if he asks you to repeat your question, I will stop your time and then let him continue, okay? So with that, Minister, welcome, and I presume you have a statement for 10 minutes?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's certainly a pleasure to be here for my first time here as Minister of Environment and Climate Change to provide an update on our progress on climate action and environmental protection and how it is reflected in these supplementary estimates. I am joined today by Christine Hogan, the Deputy Minister for Environment and Climate Change Canada, Ron Hallman, President and Chief Executive Officer of Parks Canada, and David McGovern, the President of the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. I would like to start by recognizing that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Our world faces a number of very significant environmental challenges: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution of a range of types, but perhaps the most topical issue in the recent days has been plastics pollution. All three are critically important, and all three are certainly interrelated. All three are challenges, no doubt, but they all offer opportunities for those countries that move early to address them. Les changements climatiques sont la menace
Climate change is the existential threat of our age. The science is clear and overwhelming. If global emissions continue to rise at their current rate, the world could see at least 3 degrees of warming by 2100. The implications are very real. A warmer climate will intensify weather extremes, result in sea level rise, and reduce the amount of snow, ice, and fresh water.
It is not a political issue, and quite honestly, it should not be a partisan issue. The climate crisis calls for effective and clear-eyed policies that will measurably reduce Canada's greenhouse gas emissions over the decades to come while promoting clean growth. Going forward, Canadians understand that economic progress will need to take place in the frame of environmental sustainability. No longer can we think of economic opportunities without also considering environmental impacts. This is increasingly understood in all sectors of our economy. For example, leading money managers and investors like BlackRock are making sustainability and climate risk key elements of their investment strategies. Resource companies are committing to a net zero target, as did Canadian steel producers just last week. Others, including Microsoft, have adopted even more ambitious targets. Lors de l'élection de 2019,
in the 2019 election, Canadians overwhelmingly demonstrated their concern about climate change. Our government committed to 2 key climate policies: exceeding our 2030 target of 30% below 2005 levels and achieving net zero emissions by 2030, or 50 rather. We have made tremendous progress in addressing greenhouse gas emissions since 2015.
Clean growth and climate change, the first real climate plan this country has ever had. It contains over 50 different measures, from phasing out coal to major investments in public transit and electric vehicle infrastructure to energy efficiency for buildings and industries. We invested over $3 billion to scale up clean technology, and we put in place a national price on pollution, because there can be no credible plan to fight pollution if polluting is free. Achieving net zero will require an economic as well as an environmental transformation and the mobilization of significant amounts of private capital. Certainly, a key component of any pathway will be a focus on clean technology. Hoping for technology to save us from the hard policy choices that are required to reduce emissions is not a climate plan. However, a thoughtful approach to clean tech must be part of an effective strategy to get to net zero, and in particular to help us decarbonize key sectors of our economy. And clean tech offers enormous economic opportunities for Canada. Nous avons tous un rôle à jouer dans la lutte contre le changement climatique.
We all have a role to play in fighting climate change, and I would point out that when we work together, we can achieve great things. Take the Montreal Protocol, for example. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, a Conservative Prime Minister, worked with politicians. Pardon me? A Conservative Prime Minister worked with politicians across party lines, the United States, Nordic countries, and the United Nations, to protect the ozone layer. It was tremendously effective. 197 countries signed on, and the treaty went down as the most lauded environmental treaty in history.
It will be challenging, and it will require leadership from every region of this country. Now, I would just like to very briefly walk you through our updated estimates that account for changes or developments in particular programs or services. Let us start with Environment and Climate Change Canada. The 2019-20 supplementary estimates for Environment and Climate Change Canada outline $134.9 million in adjustments that mostly relate to the implementation of the framework, which includes the Climate Action Incentive Fund. The fund applies to jurisdictions where the federal carbon pollution pricing system is in effect, so we return the fuel charge to Canadians. The new estimates reflect increases of $9.5 million in voted appropriations and $109.1 million in statutory funding. To support cleaner and more efficient travel, we have also allocated an additional $5.8 million to Natural Resources Canada for a contribution to the City of Brampton for an electric bus trial. The estimates also reflect $4.7 million to start federal contributions towards eliminating plastic waste. Passons maintenant à Parcs Canada, Madame la Présidente.
Let's now turn to Parks Canada, Madam Chair. Parks Canada is responsible for protecting our treasured natural legacy for future generations to enjoy, as well as important historic and heritage sites. Parks Canada's agency spending has gone up to $3.5 million, including $2.7 million to commemorate Indian residential school sites in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 79. The supplementary estimates B also seeks approval for a vote transfer of $12.9 million from the agency's program expenditures to the agency's new parks account in order to set this money aside and protect it until need for the development of capital infrastructure in the Rouge Urban Park.
It is requesting two interdepartmental transfers that total $1.8 million for these supplementary estimates. I am going to stop here, Madam Chair. I hope this summary provides committee members with the insights they were looking for the supplementary estimates. I certainly want to ensure the members of this committee and all Canadians of our commitment to fighting climate change and protecting our natural environment. We certainly intend to engage Canadians in discussions around these issues every step of the way. And with that, I am very happy to take your questions.
Thank you. You left us 3 extra minutes, so that was good. First round of question from Madame Finlay for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Minister and officials. Thank you all for being here. It's always informative when you spend some time with us in committee, so we appreciate it. Minister, with respect to the supplementary estimates B, the sum of vote 15, 20, and 25 on marine safety response, disaster management preparation, and implementing a federal carbon offset system totals over $1.1 million that is left over. Why hasn't that funding been fully expended?
Thank you very much for the question. I think with respect to the specifics of expending, I will actually turn to Carol in the department.
Thank you for that question. With respect to votes 15, 20, 25, and 30, those are frozen allotments that came with Budget 2019 for expenditures of PSPC, Procurement Services Canada, and Shared Services Canada for their support in implementing programs.
And those programs have not commenced, or why have they not been expended?
Those are frozen allotments carried forward to the future years, so they will then come into our main estimates for 2021.
Okay, great. Thank you. Minister, the Globe and Mail has reported that the government plans to add plastics to Schedule 1 of the Canadian Environment Protection Act, which is the list of toxic substances. Plastics are I would suggest, ubiquitous in Canada because they are affordable and can be used for so many applications. So how do you think declaring plastics as toxic without any further definition that we know of, unless you're going to give it to us today, will impact the production and availability of plastics in Canada? And how could this impact the cost of living for Canadians, especially low-income Canadians?
Thank you for the question. It's an important question. So plastic pollution in the environment is a problem. We recently went through a scientific report which identified a range of different issues with respect to macro and microplastics. And it is important that we take action to address the plastic issue generally. There are a number of tools through which that can be done. This was certainly part of the conversation that happened during the 2019 campaign. We committed to a ban on harmful single-use plastics, and the work to identify the items that will be on that list of banned products is underway at the present time. We will be looking at putting the costs of collecting and recycling plastics back on producers through extended producer responsibility, which, as you will know, is actually in place in British Columbia, the only place in Canada. And we will be looking at issues around things like recycled content requirements. That is a strategy we will be coming forward with in the coming months. Certainly the ability to regulate plastics is enabled by SEPA, and that will require a listing under Schedule 1.
But with respect to the use of plastics, I think you'd agree that some plastics are used to keep food safe. Do you not think there's a risk that without definition, this could lead to an overall reduction in food safety?
I think that's an important point. And as I say, the development of a list of those specific items that would be banned certainly will relate to the availability of alternatives and the cost impacts that would be associated with those. But that being said, for those items that will not be on the list of banned products that will continue to be in use, we need to ensure that we are actually doing better with respect to recycling, with respect to using recycled content. People think in Canada we do a great job of recycling, but if you actually look at the plastic stream, it's a very low percentage that is actually recycled. And so for those kinds of products where we need to have them, we need to do better about reusing them.
I agree with you in that. I think it's 87% that ends up in landfill. So that's unacceptable, and a small percentage that actually gets recycled. One of my concerns is that SEPA is not really designed as it is now to deal with broad classifications of products, such as plastics. And as plastics do not currently meet what we would normally see as a definition of substance, it seems that you are declaring that something is toxic in order to deal with a recycling and litter problem.
Estimates?
Yes, it is.
I think the minister did make a statement about plastic, and I will let it go for the time being.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I hope that doesn't detract from my time, Madam Chair. So I'm wondering if SEPA is also going to be used to address other critical nutrients like copper, zinc, that sort of thing.
As I think I indicated, SEPA, the precursor to being able to actually use SEPA as the tool was the science assessment, which actually demonstrated environmental harm. But certainly the nature of the listing will need to be something that we are thoughtful about in terms of how we do that. We certainly all recognize that we're not going to be eliminating plastics entirely from use in the economy. There are certain elements, certain types of products that certainly can be banned. And I think Canadians are far ahead of us on this. I mean, and many countries are. I mean, you know, China by the end of this year is banning plastic bags. Rwanda banned plastic bags years ago. Kenya has banned them years ago. But we need to be thoughtful about how we actually ensure that those things that we can get rid of, we do, and those things that we can't, that we do a better job of recycling, and that will be the strategy that we will be bringing forward in the coming months.
Thank you very much. We now go to Mr. Baker. You'll be sharing your time, I understand, with Mr. Scarpalizia. Thank you. I'll give you a 3-minute warning.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, and thank you to all of you for being here today. Minister, I represent a community called the Etobicoke Centre on the outskirts of the city of Toronto, and when I speak to my constituents about sitting on this committee, they almost unanimously ask me about the steps we're taking to fight climate change. In the supplementary estimates, you note the need for climate risk assessments by various departments, and I'm wondering if you can tell us more about climate risk assessments and why they're important to Canadians, why they'd be important to my constituents in Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you for the question. As you know very well, climate is an existential threat from an environmental perspective. It is an existential threat for human health, and it's certainly an enormous threat to our economy. Last year, we released a report called Canada's Changing Climate, which highlighted the severity of the problem and the increasing intensity of the problem. It pointed out that Canada is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world, and in fact, in the north, the northern part of Canada, even faster than that. We are feeling the effects of climate change through the changes that we're seeing with respect to permafrost, with respect to flooding, with respect to wildfires and deadly heat waves. Climate assessments are an important tool to allow us to better understand how our infrastructure may be impacted and what we need to do from a climate resilience perspective going forward. Climate mitigation is critically important in order to not make the problem worse, but the problem exists and it will get worse, irrespective of the mitigation efforts. And so what we need to do is ensure that we're focused on mitigation. It is very important that Canadians have that kind of information to make the appropriate choices.
I appreciate that. And Minister, climate change is obviously an immense challenge, as you've just alluded to. And we know that, as you pointed out, carbon pollution has a cost. Some of the funding that we're looking at today includes our government's Climate Action Incentive Fund. And I'm wondering if you could explain to the folks who are watching at home how the incentive fund helps us fight climate change, how it helps families and businesses in Etobicoke Centre.
I think we all know that putting a price on pollution is the most cost-effective way to cut emissions and to create good jobs. That has certainly been demonstrated in British Columbia, which is where I'm from, which has had a price on pollution since 2008. A family of four in your riding will get $486 back as a climate action incentive when they file their taxes. Additionally, we are helping businesses invest in projects through the incentive fund that will reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, such as installing solar panels or making buildings more efficient. Putting a price on pollution is a practical way to reduce emissions, support clean growth, and make life more affordable for families.
Thank you, Minister. I'll pass on my time to Mr. Scarpaleggia.
Bon, okay, merci. Merci, Monsieur Baker. Bienvenue.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Welcome, Minister. As you know, when we talk about climate change, we must talk about water resources, because at the end of the day, climate change is manifested on our water resources, whether we're talking about floods or dry periods. So during the campaign, we created a Canadian Water Agency in our campaign promises, and that's an innovative idea. It's your responsibility to carry out this commitment. So could you share with the committee what your vision of this new agency that we are designing at this point in time looks like? Do you believe that it will be of a significant size that will play several federal roles in terms of management and protection of water, or do you think it might have a more modest debut with a cornerstone such as, for example, everything or on all the activities that would be intended to prevent flooding or adaptations in that regard? So could you tell us what your vision of that agency would be? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'd like, first of all, to thank you for your work in terms of protecting freshwater resources in Canada. As you know, our government committed to preserve the safety and security of water in Canada. The creation of a Canadian Water Agency is essential in this regard. I have given my parliamentary secretary responsible for this and the member for Winnipeg South, Terry Duguid, to manage this important work. And the specifics of the agency remain to be determined, but we're working very closely with parliamentarians and Indigenous groups, every level of government, as well to guarantee that our water is safe and well managed. And in terms of the Canadian the legislation that manages water in Canada, this is legislation that really needs to be modernized and updated. Have you had the opportunity so far to think of what we need to do so that this piece of legislation remains relevant and it's something that we can use in the future in order to better protect?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, thank you. I believe that in the conversations that we've had regarding the Water Agency, we need to identify the priorities, and we all perhaps need legislative changes, but we'll see.
S'il vous plaît.
Merci, Président. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today and for your presentation. And in fact, I'm going to look at something that you said in order to ask a question about Trans Mountain. In your speech, you said that we cannot think of the economic aspects without thinking of the environment. So I'd like to take you back to June 2019. There was a clause between the company and the users saying that if prices went up, if they were that this could be put on the backs of consumers, something like a toll road. But it wasn't taken into account when, and even the Canada Energy Board could have intervened to make sure that this would not be paid for by consumers. However, they didn't intervene, so the taxpayers are going to end up paying this. So the oil companies that are going to use the pipeline will be able to do so at a price that's lower than the market price, and there won't be any profits from the pipeline. So the conclusions that we've drawn is that the taxpayers will be the ones who will pay for this because there's no user pay fee right now for users. So I'm wondering and looking for the figures in the documents. It's not easy to find. So did the government underestimate the costs of that project in order to keep them more secret, if you will, to ensure that people wouldn't get upset because it's going to go up and up and up, and the costs will continue to rise? Thank you for the question. I believe that the project costs are something that are being worked on with the Minister of Finance, but I will say that we have determined the costs. We have looked at that with many groups, and we have taken their advice. With this project, perhaps I'll answer in English.
From independent advisors with respect to the structure of the transaction on the Trans Mountain expansion. And certainly the intention on the part of the government has always been that it will be transacted back to the private sector once the political risks are lower. That is something that we have always intended to do. It will end up being a private sector transaction. We are confident that the Canadian public will recoup the costs and then some.
Je vais retourner dans.
Well, I'll come back to that in a question. I'll leave Trans Mountain for the moment, but I want to talk about the subsidies to fossil fuels. Apparently, there was an agreement with Argentina, and this was under the G20. So 6 countries acted within 12 to 24 months, and so I'd like to know under this agreement where Canada is. Okay, our government understands that a clean economy and a strong economy go hand in hand, and that's why we've made significant investments in order to protect the water, air, and the earth. We have worked with our G20 counterparts to ensure that we don't have ineffective subsidies to fossil fuels in 2020. Of course, there is a process that is underway with Argentina to see what steps we have taken and that Argentina has taken on their side to reduce these subsidies for fossil fuels. Yes, but by 2025. So is something tangible happening right now? Do you have an example of what is happening now? Yes, we have already eliminated. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No, it isn't. Would you like to stay within what the minister is here for? In the supplementary estimates, your question even about the transplanted pipelines cost is not, it's the cleaning cost. So the minister is here. If you stay within that envelope, that's okay. Okay? Merci.
Bon, désolée, je voulais profiter de la présence.
I'm sorry, I wanted to take advantage of the minister's presence to answer some policy questions here, but I wanted to move to another question. I'm not sure if you will accept it. It concerns health and the environment. There are a lot of world experts who are working on the effects of environmental pollution on health, because we're talking about the supplementary budget, but are there any amounts that are allocated for scientific publications or medical publications to let the people know what the effects of climate change are on health and on everything in the end? Because we know there are a lot of studies that have been carried out in that area. Yes, the Department of the Environment does carry out research internally, but we have also recently completed a report on the subject of plastics. But to respond specifically to research that's being carried out within the department, perhaps I should ask my deputy minister.
Vous avez une autre question?
Do you have another question? No, I just want to add a few words on the issue of our scientific programs for the environment and on climate change. It's a vast program that's working on several issues, health and the environment, and we're working in close collaboration with Health Canada in this area. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. And I am going to actually follow up on a few of Madame Posé's questions. The Environment and Climate Change Canada is seeking a total of $5.92 million to strengthen environmental protections and address concerns raised by Indigenous groups regarding the Trans Mountain Expansion Project. Can you explain which environmental protections will be strengthened and how those were determined?
Sure. Let me start by saying that there were very significant investments made to address a range of environmental issues well in advance of this particular portion of money. So the Oceans Protection Plan, for example, is $1.5 billion, looking at a whole range of issues around response, around strengthening local capacity, around science.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to add to that, just to frame it up a little bit, the $150 million was unspent from the Oceans Protection Plan and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This is a significant amount, especially compared to the 5.92 here. I'm curious about that unspent money as well, and is it being invested back into these kind of environmental protections?
So with respect to the money that you refer to in Fisheries and Oceans, I mean, I'm certainly happy to get you a response. I think that question has been asked in the House of Commons in question period, and the Minister of Fisheries has provided a response, but I'm certainly happy to provide another one. But with respect to the money for Environment Canada, there was, as you know, additional consultations that were done with Indigenous communities in the aftermath of the decision of the Court of Appeal. There was a significant amount, not only of conversation, but of working to accommodate concerns that were raised. And a number of initiatives are underway. The initial amount of money is in this year's budget, but it's actually a 3-year profile that relates to a whole range of initiatives in terms of strengthening local capacity, for example, of Indigenous communities.
And you know, we are able to dig into and have some transparency around this $5.92 million. the only mention of the Trans Mountain Pipeline in the estimates is this $5.9 million. But we've recently learned that the construction costs are going to be $12.6 billion to finish construction. And that's us borrowing. That's in addition to the $4.5 billion, which we already spent to buy the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which never came to Parliament. The government hasn't publicly released Trans Mountain Corporation report that yielded the most recent $12.6 billion cost estimate, so the public can actually understand what it includes, what it does not, assess future risks. We know that Canada Trans Mountain Pipeline Finance Corporation borrowed from another Crown corporation, Export Development Canada, yet we've not seen that corporate plan. As MPs, don't you think that we should have the opportunity to study the financial risks of Trans Mountain? Why is that huge expenditure, which has such significant impacts on the environment and significant impacts on our ability to meet our climate targets? Why is that not subject to parliamentary scrutiny? And will the government be making that information available to Canadians?
Thank you for the question. Let me say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, with respect to the comment that it will imperil our ability to meet our climate targets, that's just unfortunately not true. The upstream emissions associated with the Trans Mountain Pipeline were included in the Pan-Canadian Framework, so all of the upstream emissions are actually included in the plan to achieve our targets for 2030 and eventually to exceed them. So, and that recognizes that we are going through an energy transition where hydrocarbons are going to continue to be used for a number of decades to come.
If you don't mind just focusing at least for a moment on the transparency.
I'm responding to actually what you said in your question. And so the Trans Mountain Pipeline is an important part of both an economic and an environmental strategy. With respect to the costs associated with the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, again, I mean, I think we're here to talk about the environmental estimates. That's not in the environmental estimates. But what I would say to you is there was a public statement by the Minister of Finance with respect to the costs associated with the pipeline. And what he said at that time was we fully expect to recoup those costs when the pipeline is sold.
And just to be clear, I'm asking why this huge expenditure is not in the estimates. Why are we not able as members of Parliament to dig into this the way we are able to question you about the $5.9 million that we're talking about to strengthen environmental protections and address concerns raised by Indigenous
And again,
groups?
I would say to you, I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Even if it was in the estimates, it wouldn't be in my estimates. So today, my understanding is we're actually focusing on the estimates for environment and climate change. But what I would say to you is the Minister of Finance made a statement with respect to that project. We fully expect that those costs will be recouped.
And so you did mention quite a bit in your statement and just now about meeting or exceeding our targets. We have heard from the Environment Commissioner that for decades, successive federal governments have failed to reach their targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the government is not ready to adapt to a changing climate change. The quote is, "This must change." This is from our outgoing Environment Commissioner. I'm curious if you agree with that statement, given the estimates that you've tabled today. Is the government not ready to adapt to a changing climate? Do you think we're on track?
Madam Collins, your time is up. Thank you very much. Mr. Mazur, for 5 minutes.
I moved on you.
Yes, you did move on me. Confused me. I would have called you Mazur.
That's all right.
Mr. Mazur, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials for coming out this morning. Minister, in 2017, your predecessor, Minister McKenna, regarded the Manitoba Climate and Green Plan as one of the best climate plans submitted by a provincial government. Last week, that plan was resubmitted, which included a carbon levy and exemptions for farm families. A simple question, Minister. Will this government approve Manitoba Climate and Green Plan? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. What I would say to you is we have not yet received a formal proposal from the government of Manitoba. We certainly will assess it when we receive it, but it will be assessed against the federal benchmark, as we have done with proposals from all provinces and territories. As you know, the federal benchmark with respect to the price on pollution is $30 a ton this year, and it increases annually by $10 per ton until 2022.
So excuse me, Minister, so you haven't seen your predecessors, and you didn't talk about it at cabinet, you haven't seen the proposal So you have no idea what that plan looks like.
I'm very aware of the proposal that the Premier has made publicly in the press. What I'm saying to you is we actually wait for provinces and territories to provide us with their proposals in writing and assess them against the benchmark. That's what we do with every provinces and territory, and we will be doing that with Manitoba when they submit it. But it will be compared against the benchmark, which is $30 a ton at this time and escalates to $50 over the next couple of years.
Okay, I don't know if you get the gravity of how important this plan is to be approved in the province of Manitoba. There's a lot of struggling farmers out there, struggling to pay their bills, and a lot of the struggling from financial side of it is from the carbon tax that's been imposed on grain drying and space heating on farmers. It's causing a lot of financial stress, but it's also causing a lot of mental stress. Matter of fact, the Farm and Rural Stress the line itself is starting to see increased calls. So I don't know if you see any correlation, Minister, between farmers accessing mental health services and the imposition of the carbon tax, that the impact that carbon tax has had on farmers, especially since you've opposed those carbon taxes on.
Sure.
I don't know if you see any correlation in that, or if you've heard anything about that.
Whatever, is that relevant to the supplementary estimate?
It's the financial stresses that's caused this.
Wow.
Okay, we are to, Mr. Mazur, stay within the supplementary estimates to bring relevance through a supplementary estimate. How about that? Because I know all of you are new.
The carbon tax is part of the supplementary estimate.
Go to the item and say, I'm referring to item number so-and-so. That way we will note it as being relevant. How about that?
So there's been requests of the carbon tax being removed from grain drying and farm buildings, and from space heating. And you claim that the Canadians are better off for being those carbon tax being implemented.
Mr. Mazur, it's not in the supplementary estimates.
Carbon tax isn't?
No, have a look at it.
Really? No, I don't have time to have a look at it.
Okay.
So I can't talk about anything about carbon taxes being implemented on the option.
The minister is here to get you to approve the supplementary estimates. If there are some line items that you have a problem with, have your problem with.
I have a problem with the carbon tax.
It's not on the line item, so choose a line item. I'm just trying to accommodate you as much as I can. Thank you.
Well, I guess we can't talk about the $10,000 that has been imposed on a carbon tax due to grain drying. Can't explain how the minister can't ask about the minister families being better off by being taxed to death on a carbon tax and making their farm operations inoperable.
Point of order, Chair. Nobody's being taxed to death.
Oh, okay, Mr. Mazur, the supplementary estimates have a lot of information if you want to ask the minister specific questions. Like Madame Collins moved it around when I asked Posey to move it around, you can pick one of the items maybe makes relevance to you. So I'm
Zero
giving
emissions?
Yeah, go ahead, because he mentioned it in his speech. That is relevant.
Okay, zero emissions. Has your department reviewed any documents for farmers for putting carbon back into the life cycle of agriculture?
Thank you. That's actually a very important question. I'm glad you asked that. So there is certainly an opportunity, in my view, to look at agriculture as a potential sink or sequestration opportunity for us as we move forward to 2050. That is something that there are companies and organizations across the West that are looking at in terms of how to actually address this from a stewardship perspective and actually allow farmers to monetize the value associated with increasing the sequestration capacity of soils. I am very interested in that conversation, and it is something that the department is working on actively.
And how, actively, as far as what kind of modeling are you using with that is accurate? Like, there is actually lots of numbers out there that prove that we're actually a net benefiter and agriculture being part of the solution. And we haven't seen that yet. We've just seen the increase of carbon taxes paying for thousands of dollars in carbon tax. When are we going to get to the point where we can actually being part of the solution instead of being part of the problem?
So I absolutely agree with you that the farming and agricultural community can be part of the solution. I actually believe that there are opportunities to enhance the sequestration capacity and to allow the farming community to monetize the value associated with creating those offsets.
How do we do that, Minister?
as I say, that is something that we are digging into with research institutes and with companies like Terramera and others, looking at ensuring that you have the appropriate baselines, looking at the things that will actually drive additional sequestration capacity, and then being able to measure that and ultimately be able to monetize that. That is something I think is very important. As I think you are aware, I grew up in Saskatchewan. I worked for the Premier of Saskatchewan. I'm intimately familiar with some of the issues around the agricultural sector, and I think this is an enormous opportunity.
I think one of the main
You
messages.
got 45 seconds, so quick question.
Do you think farm families are better off with a carbon tax?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I thought we were at 6-minute round. You're done with your time. I'm giving you 6 minutes. Come here. Thank you. Thanks to the clerk. He brought to my attention you don't have time. 5 minutes for Mr. Sani.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Minister, for coming, and also to your very capable and highly enlightened officials for coming here this morning and discussing a topic that I think is very important to Canadians. Right now, as you are aware, we're currently facing a biodiversity crisis around the world due to numerous factors like habitat loss and climate change. I'm glad there have been a number of investments in my riding of Kitchener Centre to help improve biodiversity and wildlife habitat, and funding programs like the 50 Million Trees program that the federal government rescued last year are crucial to achieving this goal. How will projects like this help to improve biodiversity and protect wildlife across Canada?
So the issues around biodiversity are extremely important. People will have seen the World Wildlife Fund report last year that showed that the world has lost 60% of its biodiversity in just the last 40 years. Keeping our forests healthy is one of the best ways to protect biodiversity and fight climate change, because they provide habitat for a wide range of species, but they also absorb carbon pollution and protect against erosion and therefore help mitigate floods. That is why we invested $15 million over 4 years in the 50 Million Trees program that you mentioned, and will benefit communities across Ontario. It builds upon the $1.3 billion historic investment that we made in Canada's nature legacy in Budget 2018. We also have committed to 25% protection, marine and terrestrial, by 2025 and 30% by 2030. We are very, very focused on trying to stem the biodiversity decline and to ensure that we are improving the condition of our natural environment.
So the second question I have is about the Low Carbon Economy Fund. As you're aware, it's a fund that's being used to fund electric bus programs in many municipalities, for example, like Brampton. Transit is key to reducing our GHG emissions and meeting our climate targets. I've seen how successful this program has been, and these investments have been, even in my riding of with ION and LRT in Kitchener Centre. And I'm glad to see that this investment is continuing in low carbon transit. How will this investment help our spur innovation and move our transit networks towards carbon neutrality, which is the ultimate goal of 2050?
So transportation is critical to being able to move towards a net zero. It accounts for almost 25% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing pollution from transportation is essential to fight climate change, but also to support healthy communities. Through the Low Carbon Economy Fund, we invested $7.6 million towards the largest global deployment to date of battery electric buses and chargers in Brampton, Ontario. By deploying these kinds of investments, we are helping with the public transit system, improving livability within our urban environments, and cutting climate pollution.
So my final question is about plastics, and this is an issue that's of high concern to my constituents in Kitchener Centre, who are really worried about the amount of plastics that we're using. And, you know, one of the things that they're concerned about how widespread single-use plastics are and how they're choking our waterways and damaging our environment. I'm glad to see that there's funding to reduce plastic pollution here in the supplementary estimates, because we need action, I think, and I think all of our constituents want action on this issue. How will this funding help achieve the goal of limiting plastic waste in Canada and move us towards a circular economy?
Thank you very much for the question. Certainly plastic pollution is an enormous challenge, not only in Canada, but around the world. But in Canada, we have the longest coastline in the world and 1/4 of the world's fresh water, and so the emerging implications for Canada are quite significant. We made the commitment to banning harmful single-use plastics, which we intend to do in 2021, to move towards extended producer responsibility, putting the costs of plastics and plastics packaging back on the producers, and to enhance things like the recycling content so that we're actually better using and closing the loop and moving towards a circular economy. This is something that is extremely important from an environmental perspective. I would tell you Canadians are far ahead of their governments on this. Canadians are demanding action on plastics, and we intend to take it.
5 seconds.
So one final question is just when we look at what we're doing here domestically, how do you think the impact will be internationally? Because people always look to Canada sometimes when they make certain decisions. What is Canada doing? How do you think this will impact? Because we can do whatever we want here, but internationally there has to be an impact. How do you think what we're doing here is going to have an international impact?
Well, I think it will be another model for countries to consider. Certainly some of the European countries have moved on this as well. But I would also say that there is an enormous opportunity for Canada in the same way that it has worked on climate issues around leading the Powering Past Coal Alliance and those kinds of things, to work with developing countries in particular to help to develop solutions that will enable them, which may be different from the solutions we implement here, to address the plastics issue.
Thank you. Mr. Redikoff for 5 minutes.
Thank you and welcome everybody. My first question is about staffing, which I believe is an operating expenditure. I was digging around in the departmental plans for 1920 and 2021, and I found that the projected, this fiscal year, you projected 6,648 full-time equivalent staff, and the actual looks like it's coming in at 7,163, which is about 415 higher, 6% higher. What did we get for these extra staff?
Thank you very much. I mean, the first thing that I would say is we are all very fortunate as Canadians to have such dedicated staff working for us in these departments, irrespective of partisan affiliation. These public servants are extremely capable folks. But I will actually turn to my Deputy Minister to answer perhaps the specific human resources question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. So as you know, over the course of the last year, there has been some increases in the full-time complement at Environment. We do also include in our numbers seasonal and students, and all of these things accumulate to demonstrate an employee count of over 7,000.
Okay, so when you forecasted this 12 months ago, you didn't anticipate, like that's a 6% difference. How do you manage the department with changes like that?
Well, these are anticipated changes through the influx of resources that were allocated in budgets 18 and 19, and we manage our growth accordingly and against results and commitments that are made in the main estimates.
So maybe let's turn to spending, Minister. By the way, I was a former accountant, so it's coming out, I suppose. Along the same lines, the original estimates for this fiscal were $1.828 billion. And the current, with the SUP-Bs, we're at 2.006, so it's 178 million. It's nearly 10% increase. Can you explain the difference there?
Between the main estimates and the SUPs? Well, I mean, the process, as you will know as an accountant, although I would say that Parliament operates in a slightly different fashion, is that the main estimates are produced typically before the budget, and the SUPs are used to pick up budgetary items. And so it is not abnormal to see increases in the SUPs. I would say that the increases in these are actually pretty modest.
So I suppose another way to look at it is the spending from the previous fiscal was very similar to the original estimates. And so I realize that there are the climate action incentive payments increased the budget by a significant, about 110 million, but there's still another 70 million or so, which is about 4%. Are we getting value for our money in that?
Well, as I say in the remarks that I made earlier, I mean, the vast majority, as you have rightly said, is the climate incentive, which is essentially returning funds back to Canadians and to small businesses in a way that ensures that we are addressing affordability. But a number of the other pieces of that were articulated in the comments, which were things like the electric bus trial in Brampton, funding for plastic pollution. And I would say that with respect to those items, I think Canadians would say, yes, we're getting good value for our money.
So on the climate action incentive, I did some quick math, 109 million. 400 a family maybe-ish is a very reasonable number. That's 275,000 families. That's barely Saskatchewan. Where's the rest of the climate action incentive rebates? Because that doesn't seem like enough.
So the climate action incentive applies only in jurisdictions where the federal backstop is in place. There are many jurisdictions in this country that have chosen to implement their own price on pollution. That would include British Columbia and Quebec and a range of other provinces. This only it relates to those, and the amount of money that is actually returned depends very much on the jurisdiction in which you live. So we return all of the money from every jurisdiction back to that jurisdiction. The payments will be higher, for example, in Saskatchewan than they will be in Ontario.
So another way to ask it maybe is, are there climate action incentive returns in other budgets, or is it all in your budget?
So with respect to that, maybe I'll ask the CFO, but I mean, the focus of the climate action incentive is with Environment Canada. But
That's correct, Minister. The amount showing in our estimates is what comes to Environment and Climate Change Canada. We partner with Finance Canada on this program, and the balance of the revenues would be provided through Finance Canada.
Okay, different question.
20 seconds.
20 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
We're in the last numbers that I've seen for greenhouse gas emissions are 2017. Are there further numbers that have been published for actual greenhouse gas emissions?
Typically, the projections lag because of the way in which researcher data is collected. So there are no more updated numbers than what we published a few months ago. But I would say that look at the Pan-Canadian Framework and the reductions that are baked into the initiatives that will be achieved by 2030.
Thank you very much. We go to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my riding in Guelph, many individuals and businesses have benefited from the Energy Savings Rebate Program that comes through the Low Carbon Economy Fund. When they're shopping at local businesses like Shoes Appliance Center in Guelph, a small business that's been family run for a couple of generations, that are now being able to pass through savings to consumers that are looking for savings on their Energy Star appliances. Could you share with the committee how this program directly benefits individuals, businesses, and municipalities, and how it's being used to both stimulate the economy and protect the environment?
Sure. Thank you for that important question. Our government has made certainly a number of important investments in programs that help people and businesses reduce energy use, save money, and address climate change, which I think everybody wants to do. The Energy Savings Rebate Program in particular has helped Ontario families and businesses take climate action by making energy efficient products such as EV chargers and dishwashers and a range of appliances more affordable. I understand this program has received a lot of interest, and my department is working very expeditiously to process all of the claims that we have received. Through these kinds of investments, our government is helping to incent Ontarians and Canadians to take climate action in an affordable and very much accessible way.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Also, there's a grant under the Innovative Solutions Canada Fund in the supplementary estimates, $1,412,300. I'm looking at the Innovation Solutions Canada playing an important role in our communities by supporting small and medium-sized businesses, developing innovative solutions to challenges across various areas addressing climate change. So you've recently announced Environment and Climate Change Canada will be supporting Innovation Solutions Canada to address new plastic challenges. Has been mentioned a few times through a few members in more depth in some of the questions, but really a concern around plastics. Could you comment how the collaboration is going to work and how we're going to be working on challenges together to meet our climate change goals?
Sure. Clean tech certainly is part of the solution to closing the loop on plastics. Just as it is in the climate area, it's certainly an area of interest for me. I was a clean tech CEO and a senior executive for 15 years before I decided to enter politics. Boosting clean technology to address plastic pollution is certainly part of our approach to moving to zero waste. We are supporting Canadian innovators and entrepreneurs through an investment of nearly $19 million in the Canadian Plastics Innovation Challenge, which results in real Canadian-made solutions. A couple of examples: Axi Polymer, based in Montreal, will create a recyclable multi-layer film that can be used for food packaging. Green Mantra Technologies in Brantford, Ontario, will transform polystyrene insulation waste into new insulation. By improving how we manage plastic waste, we can cut pollution, but we can also create thousands of jobs from new technology solutions that we Canadians are innovating and implementing.
Great, thanks. And finally, I'm looking at collaborations. I was sitting on the Agriculture Committee. Agriculture is a huge topic for Guelph. I'm looking at, in the estimates, we have Vote 10B, $250,000, looking at some collaborations between environment and climate change and agriculture. I'm looking at the approach that we're taking, where sometimes it's a farming issue, sometimes it's a climate change issue, many times it's both at the same time. So of particular importance to me is the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food working with you through the supplementary estimates to address climate change and green growth on the farm and within our communities.
So certainly Canada's ag sector has an important role to play in the fight against climate change. Through in initiatives like the Economics and Environmental Policy Research Network, our government is supporting research into policies and programs that accelerate sustainable practices, the adoption of technology, and clean innovation in agricultural practices in the agri-food sector. As you know, through programs like the Agricultural Greenhouse Gases Program, we are supporting researchers at the University of Guelph in various projects that will help farmers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. We are also, as I said before, extremely interested in how we can utilize soils going forward as a carbon sink to help with sequestration and to allow us to take more carbon out of the atmosphere. By working across government and with the agricultural community, we can help to ensure that we are identifying and implementing solutions that will allow the agricultural sector to lead in these important areas.
You mentioned that the University of Guelph is also working on riparian zones and planting trees around streams to filter water coming off the fields, as well as being a carbon sink through the growth cycle of the trees. Is this an example that we can share with other countries or other provinces or territories?
Absolutely. I mean, these issues around the riparian areas are extremely important. I mean, when I was Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, you look at some of the data around the increased sediment in the rivers and the streams that is a result of the destruction of some of these riparian areas. That has a direct implication on the productivity of salmon spawning. So absolutely, those are critical issues for us.
Thank you. Madame Posé, for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Stay within the...
Je vais faire d'agriculture puis de poissons. Alors.
Oui, oui.
Donc,
I'd like to talk about the about SEPA. We know that there have been many recommendations made in the last Parliament, and I can't find anything on that in the budget. Is it considered in the budget that there are amounts that will be allocated to oversight of everything that it concerns the work of overseeing the environment? Are there some that I just didn't see? Yes, of course. There is money to ensure that we will continue to assure Canadians that we will have the resources to deal with those aspects of the Act, of course. And I'd also like to say that we committed to reviewing that legislation, and we have the intention of having a conversation with members of Parliament on that legislation, perhaps in the fall of this year. But the amounts that we spend on this, perhaps the Deputy Minister could help me here. I would just perhaps add a few words. We're talking today about the supplementary estimates. So these are the changes in the
supplementary estimates, but there is obviously a very significant portion of our departmental resources that go into ensuring the effective implementation of SEPA and all associated programs. It's a major part of the department's efforts.
Merci, Madame Posé. Ms. Collins for 2.5 minutes.
So just to go back to the question that I was asking, really the question is about whether we're on track to meet and exceed our commitments to reduce our emissions by 30% by 2030, and whether or not the next report from our next Environment Commissioner is going to say the same thing, that the government, like the ones before it, is failing to take the urgent and necessary action to meet our targets, to adapt to climate change, and in other words, failing to take the action that needs to be taken if we want to ensure a livable planet, because that's what's at stake right now. And so you talked about in one of the other responses that there are items baked into the Pan-Canadian framework on climate change. And do you think the initiatives that are funded here in these estimates, specifically the ones that support additional actions through the Pan-Canadian framework, are enough to close that gap and put us back on track to meeting our targets?
Thank you. It's a very important question. So when this government was elected in 2015, there was virtually nothing being done with respect to climate change. Through the work on the Pan-Canadian Framework, which involved the provinces and territories, we identified 227 megatons in reductions. And those initiatives, which are in the Pan-Canadian Framework, which is on the internet, get us a good chunk of the way to our target, but it doesn't get us all the way there. There remain 77 megatons that we need to find to meet, and during the campaign we promise to exceed that target. And that is part of the work that we are doing right now. Some of the measures that were in our campaign platform around trees and wetlands and building efficiency will help with that gap, but certainly we intend to bring forward a fully detailed plan as to how we will meet and exceed our 2030 targets.
30 seconds, Madame Collins.
I guess just, you talk about that 70 megaton gap, and you also mentioned in your previous comment to me that you don't think that the Trans Mountain Expansion Project will impact our ability to meet our climate targets. Given that we are not on track, given that the Environment Commissioner, the most recent report from the new Environment Commissioner says that there's no...
You have to be short and swift with your questions.
I will follow up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I guess the department officials will be staying for the next hour. And I'll suspend the meeting for 2 minutes. Thank you. ask the departmental officials, Department of Environment, Mr. Matt Jones, the ADM of the Pan-Canadian Framework Implementation Office, John Moffat, ADM Environmental Protection Branch, Carol Nedjum, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Services, and from the Impact Assessment, Terrence Hubbard, Brent Parker, from Parks Canada, Michael Nadler, Darlene Upton, and Boyer. How many do you have opening remarks, and who is going to do the opening remarks?
We do not have opening remarks.
Perfect. So that way... No. That allows the members to ask questions. Remember, please, that there's a majority new members to the committee, so explain in the right way. And I've already advised them that if it is not on the estimates or in the minister's speech, I will try and curtail it. So with that, Mr. Aitchison, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam.
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you all for being here. I actually, if I had the opportunity with the minister, I was going to focus a little bit more on some of his comments related to clean tech and some of the work that's going on in all across the industrial sector to not just capture carbon, but also developing ways to generally reduce carbon output, for example, because I do see it as a real primary area where we can really make some dramatic improvements in our overall footprint as a nation, and I frankly think it's a more effective tool and certainly a little easier on particularly rural Canadians and Canadians who are at the lower end of the income scale. I just think often about the many people that live in my riding, which a lot of people think is just a playground for the rich and famous, but the people who live and work there they make about 20% less in terms of their family income than the median in Ontario, and so there's people that really struggle from day to day, month to month, and they're not living lavishly. They're just trying to get to work, and so I've always struggled with a carbon tax for those folks. I understand that maybe in other places where there's other options, it's not as big an issue. So what I wanted to do, though, was to drill down into the programs that speak directly to this whole business of clean tech, this thoughtful approach that we're talking about. And I recognize I'm hopeful, I guess, that as I look through the supplementary estimates, I see that grants and contributions are almost $1 billion in this ministry, $791 million. A lot of those are contributions to agencies and international groups and that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering if in fact I guess there must be other ministries where we're specifically focusing on incentivizing industry and assisting industry and new businesses that are creating sort of these alternative energies. How much money is the government overall, I guess, across ministries? Where can we find how much we're actually doing to actually create these new opportunities?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fundamental question in terms of how we're going to address the impacts of climate change and specifically emissions. And an important piece of the puzzle is one of the 4 pillars of the PCF is advancing clean technology. There's a whole collection of programs that have emerged to advance clean technologies, the full spectrum from research, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, for example, but an increased emphasis on project demonstration, deployment, and ideally export. So there are new programs in terms of where you can find more details. These are in different departments, including ISED and NRCan, but also Export Development Canada and Business Development Canada under the ISED. portfolio. There's also a report that we do annually called the Synthesis Report on the implementation of the Pan-Canadian Framework. It includes federal and provincial and territorial measures over the span of a year. So we're about to release the third of those, but the other two are online and they go program by program, initiative by initiative. Related to the estimates here, there is the Low Carbon Economy Fund that is referenced, which invests directly through either with provinces in programs on deploying technologies or directly with industry. And there's a large and a small component of that. So there is a small business component and a bigger business component.
So if I may, there is a report somewhere that you can send me that shows me, a little more detail on some of those investments.
Certainly, yeah, we'll be happy to provide the clerk with the link to that or a copy.
Thank you. And if I may follow up, still on this whole business of contributions and grants of that $791 million, there's lots of different things, and I wouldn't begin to understand what all of them are. But I'm just, as an example, I look at sort of the Nature Conservancy of Canada, which back in 14-15 got about $8.8 million, and then nothing. But then, of course, grants in support of Natural Areas Conservation Program got money, and it continued to grow. I'm wondering if you can give me some specific examples in maybe just that category of, what specifically that money was for, and what kind of programs were supported, and what measurements are used to determine whether they were successful in terms of achieving targets and specifically in terms of reducing our footprint.
A 30-second answer.
Oh, only 30 seconds. I don't have enough time.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Niall O'Day with the Canadian Wildlife Service. So just to respond to the question around the Natural Heritage Conservation Program, that is actually a successor to the Natural Areas Conservation Program, the previous NCC funding. It's a $100 million program over 4 years. It now represents a consortium program between the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited Canada, and Canada's Land Trust community. So that's why the structure of the expenditures have changed. The targets are for them to collectively achieve 200,000 hectares of private lands protection through willing buyer, willing seller arrangements over the course of those next 4 years.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
We go to Mr. Baker. You're sharing time with Mr. Longfield?
That's
Fair
correct.
enough. You want a 3-minute warning?
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to delve a little deeper on something that I asked the minister when he was here, which is, in the supplementary estimates, we have allocations for the Climate Action Incentive Fund, and which is part of, or which is funding that flows to folks, to people, to everyday folks, through, and it comes from revenues that are collected through the price on pollution. And I'm wondering if, again, I think sometimes when I speak with my constituents in Etobicoke Centre, sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about how this all works. Like, if I'm getting money back, where's that coming from, and how does that actually help us tackle climate change? So could you just explain, how we impose a price on pollution, how that money flows, how it comes back to folks, and how it's helping to tackle climate change?
Maybe I'll start. So first of all, good morning from Burnham, Thorpe and Kipling, where I was born.
Wonderful.
So the government committed to return all money raised through the federal carbon price back to the jurisdiction of origin. We do that in two ways. One is through the CAFE, which is represents the funds raised by the carbon price on fuel. Approximately 90% of that money goes directly to households in the form of an annual check. The remaining 10% is then provided through programs run by my colleague, Mr. Jones, and they're focused on supporting small businesses, nonprofit organizations, the the MUSH sector, municipalities, universities. Then there is another set of revenue which we will see but have not yet seen, which is compliance payments made by large industry under the large industry component of the carbon price. We have confirmed that money will be returned to the jurisdiction. The government has not yet developed a comprehensive program for that, and we're engaged in discussion with industry about the best way to utilize those funds. But again, all of the money is returned. The programming is focused on reducing emissions. The household return goes directly to the household to use in whatever manner they see fit.
Okay. So the price on pollution is effectively trying to incentivize folks to incentivize all of us to pollute less, whether we're consumers or industry, and then we flow the majority of those funds back to consumers or to citizens. Is that right?
So the
10
consumer
seconds, Chair, is that what you said?
The consumer sees a price impact. The price of fuels increases, but their income effect, they're made whole. The majority of people are made whole. There's no income effect, so you can. So the basic incentive is use less fuel, and you'll have more money because your income hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on the same line and maybe a clarification from Mr. Moffat. And it also builds on Mr. Aitchison's comments around low-income Canadians and the impact of the price on pollution on them. Last weekend, I was at a free tax clinic at one of the locations in Guelph. Holy Rosary Parish, actually my parish, was hosting a volunteer tax clinic for people that make under $35,000. The money that they receive annually isn't actually a check other than it comes through their CRA, it comes through their tax return. And how important it is for low-income, particularly low-income Canadians, to do tax returns where they didn't used to get money back from the government because they weren't paying taxes. And now in this case, they do get money back because they're participating in the economy. If we've recently announced this incentive and it's gone up again this year, it's going to go up in future years. Could you comment maybe on how this incentive can help with low-income Canadians and our fight against poverty?
I apologize. I didn't. The precise question.
How the money coming through the CRA and through tax returns, how important it is for people to file taxes, because part of this climate action incentive program, which is $109,147,502 in the supplementary estimates, is flowing to all Canadians, including low-income Canadians.
So it's absolutely important for all households to file, well, all individuals to file returns, and while I can't speak to the details, the Canada Revenue Agency has an active outreach program, particularly focused on low-income individuals, on Indigenous peoples and others who may not traditionally have filed, and so there is considerable outreach underway, and it's associated, of course, not just with the climate action incentive payments, but also with other kinds of fiscal reimbursements, such as the family benefits and GST rebate and so on, again, which can only be accessed through filing an income tax return.
Thank you.
Very much.
Who have I got next? Madame Posey, for 6 minutes.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my first question would be for Environment and Climate Change Canada. In the supplementary budget, we can see that there is an addition of $4.37 million in grants and contributions. Could I have an example of where those millions of dollars have been spent, on what kinds of activities and where? Could you repeat the line and the amount, please? Where is it in the estimates? Well, I don't have the exact line. I just have the amount in front of me here. There was an addition of $4.37 million in additional grants and contributions. Therefore, Environment Canada has just up to $791 in grants and contributions. But what are these spent on, and what sort of activities?
and plastics.
Traduction.
Oh, je m'excuse.
Non, c'est correct.
J'ai pas ma...
I'm sorry. I
Non, ça fonctionne pas. C'était pas...
I wasn't ready. I'm sorry.
The French.
Just for clarification, Madame Posey is asking you about the 4 million adjustment. That's
Yes.
in, okay?
So the 4 million, so thank you for the question. The 4 million in the grants and contributions and supplementary estimates is mainly for the Trans Mountain Pipeline and plastics. Those are the two items in there.
Mhm. L'interprète me dit
The interpreter was telling me that he missed the other item, so Trans Mountain and plastics, plastic production.
Mon autre question, merci. Non,
My other question would be for Parks Canada. We know that when we expanded the protected areas, that was very good for the environment. Are there supplementary amounts that have been set aside for the expansion of these zones? Thank you for the question. I could mention that in the SUPSB, we have tabled 12.9 million in the statutory account for our parks and for capital expenditures in the future, though. So that is to ensure that we will protect the money for capital investments in our parks for new parks establishment. That's for new parks. Okay. So if we come back to the campaign promise of the millions of trees that will be planted, do you have some idea, Parks Canada, of who will be responsible for this? Will it be environmental groups? Will it be local groups in every region of the country? And those people might be ready to work. How is that going to be done?
For that program. However, we're working with our colleagues at NRCan and Environment as well that play a role, and we'll be determining what contribution Parks Canada can make in terms of planting.
Ça serait le ministère de...
It would be Natural Resources Canada that would be responsible for that. And particularly through the Forestry Service. And they would be the lead on that program. So in the supplementary B budget, there are amounts set aside for youth. And I'm wondering if there's a link between the tree planting and that item.
It's a question really for her.
Les estimés supplémentaires pour...
The supplementary amounts for youth are for youth employment programs. There's no connection to the trees. In the area of science. Do I have some more time? So I would go to the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. We could have seen that you were asked to transfer $2 million to the Department of the Environment to offset that government's operating pressures. So could you define operating pressures, please?
Financial pressures within Environment and Climate Change Canada that were experienced as a result of increased costs in public prosecutions and litigation costs, for which our main estimates amounts were insufficient to support. And so we sought additional support from our colleagues in the portfolio and the agency. And we are presenting this transfer through the supplementary estimates.
Vous avez 20.
You have 20 seconds remaining. 20 minutes. Oh, I'll take it. So those amounts served what purpose at the Impact Assessment Agency since they were a transfer? Well, the goal was to support our partner in this portfolio. Thank you.
Madame Collins for 6 minutes.
Just to follow up on Madame Posé's question about the grants and contributions, that adjustment, the 4.3 million, that's directly related to the funding to strengthen environmental protections and address the concerns raised by Indigenous groups. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. And can you explain a little bit about the consultation process with Indigenous groups that led to these measures? How was Indigenous input incorporated into the plan and environmental protections? Will any of the funding be going directly to Indigenous groups who are best placed to provide stewardship and protect cultural and biodiversity through control of their own territory?
Perhaps I can respond. So this this funding is part of a full suite of funding that the government has provided as accommodation measures for Indigenous communities directly or indirectly affected by the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The decision around the nature of the accommodation measures and the magnitude of the accommodation measures was taken following intensive consultations with all affected Indigenous communities along the line of the pipeline and in the Salish Sea. That engagement was coordinated by our colleagues at Natural Resources Canada.
Will the communities who are still in opposition be receiving equal amounts of funding to strengthen environmental protections and address their concerns as the communities who are in support of the Trans Mountain expansion?
I don't think I can say that any one community will receive an equal amount to others, but the program is targeting all affected communities, regardless of any position that they took during the consultations. It's actually primarily not a program for dispensing money directly to a community to use as it wants. These funds are established under certain programs focused on primarily on building capacity to monitor cumulative effects.
The funding won't necessarily go directly to Indigenous groups.
Well, ultimately, a lot of it will for capacity building, but some of it will also be dedicated to doing environmental studies on issues identified by Indigenous communities.
Just, Chair, how much time do I have?
About 3 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. Maybe I'll change to a new topic quickly. So with the 454,000 that's being transferred from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to respond to Indigenous concerns on the overall health of the Salish Sea, can someone explain the plan for how this money is going to be spent and what the consultation process with Indigenous groups were that led to these measures, how that Indigenous input was incorporated?
So again, that's all part of the accommodation measures that were developed under the TMX decision. I think it's primarily a vagary of the way government budgets are dispensed. Money was allocated to departments early on, and then as the design of the program evolved and different departmental responsibilities became clear as a result of the ongoing engagement with Indigenous communities, a decision was made that Environment Canada needed a little more and DFO needed a little less. But again, the decision the decision that led up to that was informed by the ongoing engagement. So it wasn't engagement about that $500,000. It was engagement with the communities in the Salish Sea about what kind of government-supported activities would be appropriate to address their concerns?
I guess my community, I'm representing the riding of Victoria, and the neighboring communities on Vancouver Island are all very concerned about the impact of the Trans Mountain Pipeline on the Salish Sea. 7-fold increase in tanker traffic, the risks to our coastal communities, to our economy, and especially the impacts on Indigenous rights. And I'm curious if this money that's being transferred, is this 400,000, which is specifically around the Salish Sea, is it going to be going directly to Indigenous groups who are the ones who are best placed to steward and protect this kind of biological diversity and really need to have control over their own territories?
So this funding is part of a larger, larger program around the Salish Sea, which is a program designed to engage all the Indigenous communities in a discussion and a planning process to identify the issues, the cumulative impact issues of concern to them, and then to develop ongoing monitoring activities to enable both those communities and relevant decision makers outside those communities about how best to manage those impacts.
Thank you. We now go to the 5-minute round. Mr. Mazur for 5 minutes.
Hi there. Thank you. Question around agriculture and the impacts on that, rural Canada versus urban Canada. There was comments made around the Climate Action Fund or pricing of pollution. There you go. So I got the two terms in there. Or carbon tax, commonly known as. The impacts of that, urban versus rural, and especially on agriculture. In my riding alone, there was about $12 million removed in the name of carbon tax, just from agriculture alone. And one broiler barn for a supply management barn had this baby chickens in there. They raise them up to so many pounds. It takes fuel. They were charged a 42% increase on carbon tax, $420 on a $1,000 fuel bill, in the name of carbon tax. Those kind of disproportionate things are going on every day in agriculture. How do we monitor that? How do we where do we look in the subs to prove that? Where do we look to start building that case that we can show the departments, show people that this is going on, and how do we give ourselves the tools to get this turned around? Because it is removing millions of dollars in the name of carbon tax, but yet it's a detriment to our agriculture production and food production in this country.
So this, as you're aware, is an issue of concern and interest to the government. The initial design of the carbon pricing system explicitly addressed considerations of the agricultural community. The agricultural community, the federal pricing system is designed to minimize the impact on the agricultural community.
Where would I look for that?
Okay, so we have I can provide the committee with documents around the design of the federal pricing system and documents that we developed with Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada that describe the impact of the carbon pricing system on various components of the agricultural sector. Be happy to share those documents with the committee. Okay,
because the scale is it is huge. And I don't think people. And so when we talk about you're getting the money all back, consumers, there is that blend in there in that gray area that we're getting caught. Rural Canada's getting caught right in the crossfire every day. As far as when it comes to modeling, as well, what models are we designing? Like where we say so. Rural Canada is emitting this, urban Canada is emitting that. What models are we using? Where are they up to date? I know that we've been struggling with those models, and how are they all based off of the Climate Action Fund? Like the numbers and the models have to be based off of something. So where do they, or how are they being reconciled? Who do we talk to about that as well?
Well, we have a dedicated team in Environment Canada to two of relevance, one that does our national GHG inventory, and another that does our modeling and projections into the future. And I know they'd be happy to describe their models for you and how they operate. But certainly in terms of inventorying GHG emissions, that's done according to the guidelines set by the UN body that all countries follow, and in terms of our projections of emissions and where they're coming from and so forth, that is a general equilibrium model that is similar to those used in your major G7 countries, and we'd be happy to provide additional information on how the models operate.
Could I just emphasize that the measurement and modeling addresses emissions and sequestration? So the model is our reports are designed to account for sequestration. In other words, the amount of carbon that, for example, certain farming practices, certain forestry practices take out of the atmosphere. And
So which department does the modeling?
Environment and Climate Change Canada does the modeling. We are supported with some data from other departments, but all of the modeling is done by the department. And as my colleague emphasized, the actual modeling approaches, particularly for farming impacts and forestry impacts, follow international protocols.
I guess I could a question between G7, other countries, and Canada. I always get kind of concerned with that. So my riding is the size of Nova Scotia.
You know you have no time left, right?
Oh,
I've been very nice to you.
Okay.
Okay, somebody will carry on that question. Perhaps Mr. Sani will.
Thank you very much for staying here. I appreciate you being here. I have a couple of questions. One of this is about basic research. A lot of times Canadians don't realize that the government of Canada does research, which creates either software or products. And that product or that software is actually sold or licensed to other private sector interests. So I'm just wondering, how does that framework work? Because I know that there's a lot of research that's being done currently in terms of modeling in Environment Canada. How is that, A, used to further our own domestic priorities, but also, how is that used internationally? Because obviously we have a responsibility to the world. So how does that work, if you could explain that to me?
So I think I might defer to my colleague Nancy Hamzawi, who's the head of our Science and Technology branch, who I'm sure will be very pleased to tell you about the world-class research that is happening in Environment Canada.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for the question. So at Environment and Climate Change Canada, we have, within my own branch, the Science and Technology branch, about 1,500 scientists. That complements scientists that are active in other parts of the department, like the Meteorological Service of Canada and the Canadian Wildlife Service, that are focused on those particular program areas. We have networks both domestically and internationally. So we will work with industry, with academic institutions in Canada, but also internationally. So you will see us part of technical working groups, including at the United Nations, where we are working on developing methodologies to be able to ensure that the best available knowledge and science informs our approaches to modeling in the various disciplines.
So I'm going to ask you a philosophical question, and this is part of my training as a pharmacist. You know, a lot of the commentary that's been made amongst certain people is that Canada has a very low emission footprint in terms of 1.6%. Yet people don't realize that we are one of the highest per capita emitters in the world. We're one of the 10th largest emitters in the world. And I'm reminded of the fact of our history as a country, the moral responsibility we had as a country. In 1921, we invented insulin. At that time, we could have been criticized as a small country, that we did not have that many diabetics, but we felt a moral compulsion in the world that because of our
Point
talent...
of order, Madam Chair. I mean, we were stopped over and over again by my colleagues
I'm
or
getting to the point.
irrelevance.
I'm getting
So-
the point.
Okay.
I'm building up.
I'm
building up the
I'm
case.
fascinated to hear
This
how
is
you
science,
get
right?
this
is
into
science.
estimates.
Oh, it'll be
Thanks.
interesting. Just wait and hear. So,
Okay, bring it to
I
relevance.
could have given you
my
the
point
same
is
answer.
my point is very simple, right? We've always been leaders in the world, even though we have a small country and a small footprint. Now we are faced with an existential crisis. What do you think is our role in the world as a country to solve the climate crisis? And what are
Madam
we doing?
Chair, which line item does that relate to in the SUP fees?
That's true. It doesn't. Yeah, relevance.
It doesn't.
That's
Well,
right.
we're talking about
It
intellectual
doesn't.
property, obviously. You know, I mean, what's our
There
advancement?
is no. It's a philosophical question. There is no line item here that talks about it. But if you want to relate it to a line item like the Climate Incentive Fund, perhaps, then go for it.
Okay. How is that philosophical question going to relate to the Climate Incentive Fund?
Can I maybe I can respond. As public servants, we implement decisions made by the government. It's up to elected members, such as yourself, to make those sorts of decisions. Many of the programs that we implement, ranging from basic science up to regulations, and then programs that transfer money to private sector research, development, and deployment activities, I think are all related to the government's overall emphasis on addressing climate change, not just as a domestic priority, but as a global citizen.
1 minute, okay.
Zero emission,
so
maybe.
Here comes a line item question. Transfers to other organizations. We do a lot of work internationally, and we also do a lot of work with the United Nations. What work are we doing with the United Nations, and what's our relevance with them?
I don't think we have anybody from international, so I'll address the question. Our international, so I take it the question was primarily focused on international climate change activities. We have a range of international climate change activities. So we are active participants in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is a forum for all countries to come together and basically exhort and create a framework for collective action and individual action. It also does important work on developing rules around such things as tradable emissions permits across countries.
Thank you.
I just wanted to emphasize,
Okay,
we also
sure.
have direct transfer programs to support developing countries, and then our domestic R&D, much of which is focused on building Canadian export capacity.
Thank you. Mr. Redicop for 5 minutes. Nope.
Yeah, no. I just want to follow up on a few things that we've discussed here. With Mr. Mazur, you were talking about modeling and forecasting and all those things. And you referred to some of the work that's being done. And I'm just asking if we could have the work product related to the urban and rural work that's been done on the carbon pricing model on that area. If you could provide that for the community.
That summary piece that you said about how rural
you don't have to answer it now, but if you could provide for us the work product related to the modeling and forecasting that you're speaking about rural and urban differences and how you've accommodated that in the carbon pricing model.
We'll absolutely provide the material that the department has developed related primarily to the design of and impact of the federal carbon pricing system on the agricultural community.
The Madame Posé was asking about the grants and contributions of $4.3 million, and you spoke about what it was generally for. Could you provide us with a list of who it was provided to, the amounts?
At this time, these are monies that we come into the department in our budget, have not all been fully dispensed.
What would be an example of some of the organizations that these will be paid to? The ones that have been paid.
I would be happy to provide that information. I don't have it with me.
Okay, if you could provide that to the committee, that would be great. And then also, Madame Collins was speaking about the concerns raised by the Indigenous groups regarding the Trans Mountain Expansion project, and we were speaking there about accommodation measures, and it was part of a larger program. And I think the same question there: who is actually receiving that money? Is there a list of that we can have to see where this money is actually going?
Again, those programs are just starting, so decisions around disbursements, very few decisions around disbursements have been made. However, we do have descriptions of the programs, which include descriptions of all of the First Nation communities that are participating in the program, and we can provide those descriptions.
That'd be great. And then we talked about, we talked about the operating pressures, which I thought was a very interesting terminology, and you said that was regarding litigation. So could you maybe speak more about the type of litigation, what are some examples there?
So the increased cost in litigation is directly related to challenges on carbon pricing, and the public prosecution costs are related to the Volkswagen case.
Okay. Now, part of developing these numbers are the targets that you folks have in the department, and I found that on the GC on the GC InfoBase website, and I noticed there was a target there called co-development of indicators with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation to ensure they are engaged in the implementation of the Pan-Canadian framework. And in 1819, the targets were to be developed by this March of 2020. And that apparently isn't happening because in the new plan, the new date is NA. So I'm just wondering if somebody could explain that, if work has been suspended with Indigenous people or where we're at there.
Yeah, so that's an ongoing process. The progress has not been as rapid as we had originally anticipated. There has been an engagement process through a number of different programs who are all working with Indigenous peoples to ensure that that their participation is reflected in the design and implementation of programming, and those indicators are actively being developed by a number of people, but they're not yet complete.
Is there any indication of when that new target will be set?
Yeah, I think our hope is that we would be able to complete that work in the coming fiscal year.
Okay. And I guess maybe more broadly on targets, there were 56 targets in total for the Environment Department. I went through that. I found that about 13 had been met, which is about 23%. Are you happy with that result? These are probably out of the 18-19 results in GC InfoBase. Is that reflective of the departmental results that you're getting on indicators?
And a quick 30-second answer, please.
Yes. So what's reported in the departmental results plan is annual results, and a number of programs that we deliver need a longer period of time for us to capture the information on performance, and for that reason, the information is not available within the year that the departmental results report is issued, but we follow it on a longer term throughout the program life cycle.
Thank you. Mr. Scarpoligio for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, quick question to begin. Do you have a number that describes how much the department would spend in any given year on programs, activities related to freshwater, or do you have a summary figure, or is it just too difficult to pull together?
I know that we do have the information based on our core responsibilities, and water is one of them, but it's not freshwater separately. So we would have to get back to you how we would prepare that.
So it would include oceans, is that?
It would include the Oceans Protection.
Yeah, I think it would be. I don't know. I think it would be a useful measure in terms of allowing legislators, parliamentarians to get a better grip on this issue, in your department, but also I would ask for the same questions of NRCan and fisheries and so on. But I would like to speak about the Freshwater Action Plan. The departmental plan for 2020-2021 indicates that funding for the plan will be decreasing in 2022-23. Is that correct?
Yes, that's another sunsetting program.
Okay, so I don't mean to interrupt, but I have limited time. So what I'm concerned about in terms of the sunsetting is the sunsetting specifically of the funding in Budget 218 for the National Hydrological Service. And the reason I'm concerned is because, just referring to Mr. Redekop's point, there are only 4 indicators in the departmental results report of 218, 219 that were not met, and 2 of these were in relation to water, and if I could just find them here, but I think one of them has to do with the National Hydrological Service and the satisfaction that provinces expressed with the service and their I guess their interactions with the service. It says here, in regards to the hydrological services program, that the target or the indicator is the percentage of provincial and territorial partners rating their satisfaction with Environment Canada's hydrometric services. The target is 80%, and the actual result was 56%. So I am concerned about the fact that that funding for the service, which I'm told is in the process of trying to upgrade its monitoring stations, is that correct?
So the funding that we received.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Diane Campbell, excuse me, the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Meteorological Service of Canada. So the funding that was received in the budget that you referred was targeted towards 3 specific themes. One of them was to actually deal with some serious rust out in our monitoring equipment. That is midway through the delivery, and we have focused on the high-risk stations, and we plan to complete that infrastructure renewal by the time the money sunsets. But there were 2 other elements as well. One was to work more closely with the provinces and territories on a number of things, including data sharing mechanisms. And then thirdly, to enhance the capability of doing hydrological and weather modeling combined, so prediction. So with respect to the second point you raised on the satisfaction, this is part of our ongoing approach in the meteorological service to always talk to our clients, find out their satisfaction. So we are definitely acknowledging that the provinces and territories would like to have greater real-time access to data and a number of issues. We have formal mechanisms in place with them where we work with them on a monthly basis to co-deliver the programs, but also collect what the needs would be. And the way we then work with that data and information is to then use that to say what are the gaps for future programming needs or technology needs or innovation needs in the next cycle of program planning and delivery.
So with the sunsetting of these funds, will this make it harder to upgrade these interactions with the provinces?
Well, our plan is that we put a specific plan in place when we requested that money. We plan to deliver that.
Okay.
But there was a component of that program which also tested the implications of new technologies. So it will then give us the pros and cons of introducing new ways of monitoring. And depending on the science results, we would then bring that into a business case of whether we would implement that more fully after the money is sunsetted.
Thank you. Madame Posé, 2.5 minutes.
Merci. Donc pour
Therefore, for Parks Canada, we can see that there's a park that says there's $176 million to promote innovative approaches, because I'm always interested in hearing about innovative ways to reduce greenhouse gases. So can you talk to us about that? Thank you for the question. Thank you very much. Parks Canada is now implementing a program of reinvestment in all of our assets, in fact. So at this point in time, we are refining the program in order to ensure that things are working as effectively as possible for the future and to green our installations. That affects almost all of our assets. But you don't have any specific examples? Okay. Now, in terms of my question earlier regarding the tree planting, you talked about Natural Resources Canada but you're the ones who are the experts in this domain. So can you tell us if you have a plan to say what species might be chosen? Where are you at with that whole issue?
Beginning now, but as I mentioned, we're working in collaboration with Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada, and Parks Canada as well to look at developing the plan for that.
Si je peux ajouter,
If I may,
in addition to the expertise that Parks Canada has, the Canadian Forest Service has considerable expertise, and they will be leading this exercise, this initiative.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Madame Collins.
I wanted to follow up on the questions about the $2 million transfer, specifically around the investigation into VW. And out of that $2 million, or what were the costs for that litigation?
I don't have that information with me.
Could you follow up with a report on the breakdown of the costs?
I will see what is possible because those costs come from justice or from public prosecution. My apologies. Yes, we can look into it.
And forward it to the committee? Great. And yeah, I'm curious, do you have an idea if, it's my understanding that there has been no public accounting for the length of the investigation. Do you folks know, especially given the existence of the U.S. Statement of Facts, kind of why it took so long and why we would need to be doing this transfer because of budgetary pressures? Maybe.
I don't think we can. I don't think we have any information on that, and that's an issue that the department doesn't. I mean, we as a department. As any department that is involved in prosecution, we provide information, evidence. However, prosecution decisions and management of prosecutions those decisions are all made by the public prosecutor, and so those kind of issues would have to be taken up with them.
And my understanding that the enforcement officers, though, report to the minister. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so they would have been actually undertaking that investigation and the length.
That's correct.
So is there any way maybe we could get a follow-up on some kind of public accounting for the length of that investigation and now the impact on our budgetary constraints?
So the money that we're transferring was transferred to the Department of Justice, right? The Public Prosecution Service.
Yeah.
So that wasn't associated with the length of the investigation.
But it was with the cost of the investigation?
No.
I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here, and there are a few items that you have promised to send, so the clerk will follow up with you. And thank you for being here, and with that, meeting adjourned.